Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show with a historian, John Dodds, and our producer, Jason Ruck. I'm Tom Pippins, and JD, an amazing sponsor. We know all about Craig Caston and Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits. Moonlight Graham, they make it all happen. Craig is the straw that stirs the drink. The guest you have, Andre Greska from Paint Touches. Amazing.
Sure, he's an analytical expert, and we've always enjoyed Paint Touches. He started Paint Touches with Mark Stratman, one of our old student staffers at MarquetteHoops.com, and it'll be a great show.
Well, Andre, first of all, how did you get into the business of Paint Touches?
I mean, it's a longer story, but to keep it condensed, we were in at the Marquette Tribune. A couple of friends and I really wanted to get into basketball at the next level. Obviously, the Marquette Tribune published twice a week, and we were like, you know what? We want to go in depth. We want to really do it big. Senior year, it was 2012, so with the DJO, Jay Crowder, really good storylines, a really good prospective team. And we just started writing, and it worked because people started reading, and we saw the clicks start to go up, and then we saw people that were interested. So we did it senior year, and then we were in Louisville for the NCAA tournament. We were talking, we're like, we really want to do this some more. So we're like, well, let's just keep doing it. I was worked nearby in Greenfield, so I was able to attend the games that year, and we just kept it rolling. Obviously, life happens. I had kids. Mark moved out of state. He got a real job. And I just kept writing because people seemed to interact. It was my personal kind of way to connect with the team, even though I wasn't in Milwaukee area anymore. And like I said, it's just been a nice way to kind of get feedback on some of the crazy things that I think about, and just an outlet for all of these numbers that are running through my head at all times.
Yeah, Paint Touches. I love it. As John was telling me earlier, of course, we know for many people, and Buzz Williams, the former Marquette coach, you got to get those touches in the paint. You don't hear that basket. Old school people such as myself, it's a different world, of course, over the decades, and analytics are a big deal, aren't they? And I think that's, perhaps the heart and soul of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So the Paint Touches literally came from Buzz. He was always stressing Paint Touches. So we were like, oh, it's something that's Marquette related without necessarily saying Marquette. So it's stuck, and it's become, I mean, it's in the lexicon now in terms of just generic basketball terms, and it's probably been there before. So that worked out nicely. And what actually just ended up happening is that we got an access to Synergy, which is a data platform, video data. So it gives you a lot of ways to parse the numbers. And I really, really liked kind of seeing that level of analytics. Obviously, you see the box score, you see points, you see rebounds. KenPom was already existent at that time. It wasn't necessarily as general in terms of everyone knowing some of these phrases. So we kind of delved into both of those at the same time. We really wanted to get not just the base level metrics. We wanted to go to the next layer. We wanted to see, okay, is there anything that we can pull out that someone that is just watching the game or just looking at the box score afterwards can't? And that's where we focused on. We did a lot of shot charts. We created a lot of individual like pick and roll stats and things that, again, not necessarily helpful to the layman, but I'm not saying I'm a big nerd. My in real life job is a data analytics. So these are the kinds of things I'm doing anyways. I like to visualize the data. I like to show people something that they might not have seen before. And again, to do it with something that I'm spending half of my day thinking about anyways, seemed like a no-brainer.
Andre, can you relate what you're doing to the effectiveness of this year's Marquette University basketball team, Shaka's 23-24 version?
I mean, I think the best part about it is that last year we saw an incredible amount of health. And that's one of the things you can't control. Like, you don't know when someone's going to land on someone's ankle. You don't know which thumb is going to get jammed in practice. And you don't know when your oblique is going to get hurt with throwing a pass you've thrown probably 500,000 times. What is nice is that with certain pieces of data, you are able to optimize for some of those missing pieces. So again, if Chase Ross happens to miss a few games due to injury, he dislocated his shoulder, you have the data to show, okay, what kinds of lineups work best without him being able to step in. And again, that's a huge change because if you have Zayd Lowry come in, He's definitely going to give you a defensive presence, can hit the three, but is not going to be someone that's penetrating or creating for other people. Whereas Trey Norman, maybe not as good on the ball, or definitely not from a help defense perspective. But he can create for others. He can attack the paint. He can force the defense to collapse. And obviously the goal is to rotate the ball around to find the open shooter. So with small samples, I talked to Devin Mulry, who's the Marquette's video and analytics guy this year on the bench. He worked for HDI, which is an analytics company. Last year, he was Marquette's consultant. So he was able to move into a role with Marquette this year, and he's worked with Shaka previously at Texas. So he knows the staff well, and he knows, obviously, analytics really, really well. And one of the things he says is a lot of times with lineup data in particular, people don't account for variance and luck. What is variance? Well, if you do something 10 times, if something happens twice, you're going to think, ooh, that's not a lot, but it's just because you only did it 10 times. So he likes to have a sample size of about 100 before he values any sort of lineup metrics. And he also says the three-point shot is one of the most lucky or unlucky things that you can gauge. So it feels really good when shots are going in and you say, oh, the team is going great. But earlier in this year, I think between Maui and probably until the students came back, so mid-January, Marquette is one of the worst shooting streaks I've ever seen in terms of it was creating great open shots. If you looked on something like shot quality, if you looked at synergy, unguarded shots, it was taking, I think it was like 12 unguarded shots, and it had the second lowest percentage on those, again, unguarded, so no one is there. It's not a difficult shot, and it's something that Marquette hit at over 44% last year. On those unguarded threes, Marquette was shooting something like 29% as a team for that stretch. So again, the analytics will tell you, keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, the process is good. The process is working. We're creating these open shots, maybe optimized for who is shooting, maybe the time of game. You can tweak some of that stuff, and that's where the coaching comes in. But as long as the type of shot that you are getting is of high quality, and again, the staff measures all this in practice, they know what kind of shot they want. The players themselves are drilled into this, and they're teaching each other. This is what analytics is for, is to instill this sort of overarching plan so that you don't have to be thinking about, oh, this is a good shot or this is a bad shot. You've already done it. You've done the work. Your only job is like, okay, I'm open. I'm ready to shoot. My hands in the shooting pocket, let it launch. And obviously the results have turned around since, I think, late January. They're shooting some of 40% from three compared to 29. And again, going back to the original point, the three-point shot is so determinative of outcomes nowadays. So sometimes it's with you, sometimes it's not. But knowing what is a good shot and kind of hope, and not hoping, but knowing that you can get to that point, that's where the value in all of the analytics that the staff uses and that a lot of staffs use comes in handy. The last 3 years, it feels like I learn more from watching and seeing how they are putting all of this into play than I ever have before. It really feels like it's cutting edge, and not necessarily in the sense that they're implementing new stats or new metrics. It's just they are taking the data that's available. They are pushing the boundary of how to apply it. And then with the players in store, with Tyler Kolek, Osogadaro, Cam Jones of the world, you see a beautiful offense and a very improved defense as well.
Al, I wonder what Al McGuire would have thought about that. The late and legendary, the same Hank Raymonds, Rick Majerus. It's awesome. When John and I were speaking earlier, Andre, it just blew my mind when he said something about Cam Jones, and I know you can take us into it, a comparison with a big guy at Purdue, Zach Edey. But I was saying to myself, he didn't make first team, he didn't make second team, Kolek first team, Osa. I mean, maybe they didn't want an overabundance of Marquette players, but how do you overlook this guy? But what you're going to share to me is astounding regarding Cam Jones.
Yeah, it was incredible. So he had a very good start of the season. I think in the non-com portion, he was playing at an All-American level. In terms of O rating, offensive rating, it's what it measures. It's a big formula. Basically, what this person is adding per 100 possessions. So on average, it would be 100. So 100 points and 100 possessions. It's not necessarily points. It's including a lot of different other factors. But that's what you want to get to. You want to be above 100. At the start of the season, he was at about 120. So he was playing just this absurd rate. He had a little bit of a dip when post the Wisconsin game and into his injury where he missed a couple games. I think he was in the high 90s. His turnover rate went up. Since February 3rd, when he came back, his O rating is 141. And when you compare that nationally, and for high usage players, so players that use 24% of the possessions when they're on the floor, he is first of all high major players, higher than Zach Edey, higher than any player you pick from in the country. He has been the most efficient, the best offensive player for over a month now at 141. I think Edey was at 120 something. So not just by a little, by an exorbitant amount. He has been so good. And then when you compare it in terms of the Big East standpoint, he has done something that only 7 other players have done before by finishing the season with an O rating over 120 and usage over 24, and it played at least 60% of minutes. In that span, there have been 5 Big East Players of the Year. McDermott, there's Hansborough, a couple other players, and then you had Sanogo last year, who was the Final Four most outstanding player. And then you also had Cam and Devontae Gardner, who did not even garner an honorable mention. So again, the level that he has played at for an extended period is something that I do not take for granted. Like, I love Kolek's passes, and Oso's defense does not get enough credit either. But what we're seeing from Cam right now, the past month plus, is Marcus Howard level amazing. And I do not use that lightly.
Pip, we don't have analytics at our site, but what we do have is the blender. And I get out the blender and I get out, and when I watch Cam Jones, I think Nicky Van Exel, left-handed, about the same size, athleticism. And then I'll go back to some of the older Marquette fans will remember Sam Worthen. Sam Worthen used spins at angles on the backboard when he finished. I'm wondering, one more year from now, if Cam Jones, working with Todd Smith for one more year, could really be something special in the NBA lottery.
I mean, you got to get Shaka to get him on the Versa Climber, right? That's what worked with Job after we saw that dunk on Kalkbrenner. That came out of nowhere. But I think to your point, Cam Jones's finishing was unbelievable last year. And it has been probably his whole career. Ben Steele of the Journal Sentinel had an unbelievable article, I think it was last year, showing kind of how growing up, he was always in the post. So he learned these post games. That's kind of where he learns his maneuvers, the English off the glass. Obviously, an incredible amount of God-given talent outside of the work that he's put in. But he shot 69% from twos at close distance this year, which is, again, this is like Klingon, Edey level of efficiency. Then he's 6'5". He does not, like, to John, to your point, he does not play above the rim. Everything is below the rim or kind of off the glass. But what he does, it's just so much fun to watch. And like outside of the numbers, because the numbers are great, to give you context, kind of like what you're seeing is special. But you watch him, like the way he was working Xavier inside and out, either a step back 3 or just driving past 3 people. It was so much fun, and it was such I said, he had a lot of swag to him, because most players, you only get that when they're like really, really feeling themselves, and he's always feeling himself. Again, one of the quotes, he's like, "I'm not surprised when I play well. I'm actually surprised when I don't play well." And then that's the kind of comment that you would hear from like an Al McGuire type quote book, because it's so true. Again, I love watching him. I'm very excited. I'm hopeful that he'll have another year with Marquette, because what we've seen the last 3 games where he's been the guy shows you that he is not just a very good offensive third wheel. He has it in him to be the alpha guy. He could be a 20-point scorer if Marquette needs that next year. And again, he's just dripping with swag.
Of course, when you talk Marquette, you're always talking about Tyler Kolek and the aforementioned Oso Ighodaro. How do they rate in that analytics world?
Oh man, Tyler Kolek. I feel bad because I've probably tweeted and posted more about Tyler than anyone not named Marcus Howard, and I feel bad because again, Oso deserves just as much love. So we'll start with Oso right now. He obviously did not win Defensive Player of the Year. That went to Creighton's Ryan Kalkbrenner, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Very good defender, obviously alters everything around the rim. But he's very visible in the sense that everything he does, blocks, altering shots. You can measure and you can see it with your eyes. Oso has been more valuable than Ryan Kalkbrenner. What do I mean by more valuable? There are stats on Hoop Explorer which measures kind of how much better a team is with you on the court than without. And I think for Kalkbrenner, they were about 9.9 points better defensively with Kalkbrenner on than when he went out. So basically, they gave up 9 additional points per 100 possession when you factor in the opponent quality when Kalkbrenner is on the court. For Oso and Marquette, it's 15. And again, Marquette has a better defense basically by any metric this year than Creighton. So Marquette is better as a team, but when Oso is not on the floor, and again, we saw that against Creighton themselves, the defense just does not work the same way. And why is that? Because Oso not just plays the 5, he plays the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4. He blocks all the passing lanes. He corrals and he for rebounding purposes. He is one of the best defensive players I've seen at Marquette. And again, my history does not go back as far back as John. He's probably got a better context, a better blender for that. But defensively, from like an advanced analytics perspective, there's no one I've seen at Marquette that has this level of defensive impact since Jay Crowder. And again, Jay Crowder did okay for himself post Marquette.
Yeah, you said it.
And then to take it back once more to Tyler, because again, we do want to give some numbers context to show you how great he was. He was the Big East Player of the Year last year, a consensus All-American, and he was significantly better this year in almost every regard. His O rating is up, his usage is up, his pick and roll efficiency is up, and he has more pick and rolls this year than anyone in the Big East, and he has the second best efficiency on those. And again, the more volume, the lower the efficiency. It's a fairly steep decline. So the more you do something in terms of basketball, the more shots you take, the more whatever you're expected to get a lower efficiency, so a number off it. And he defies expectations. When I checked, he had the highest points per possession. So basically how many points the team or he scores on every pick and roll possession of any high major guard with at least 350 pick and rolls this year. And he hasn't even played the last 3 games. So again, I will not stop gushing about any of these players because it's not just the results on the court. It's the individual growth. It's the amount of work they put in, and it's the amount of fun that they give us every time we get to watch them.
I want to ask you, if I may, Andre, about Stevie Mitchell, because golly, I mean, what can you say about maybe the glue to the Marquette Golden Eagles team? Yeah,
I mean, to bring it back to Mark's point, he wrote a column for us on paint touches when he went to one of the games, and he's like, Stevie is too good to be a glue guy. Usually when you think of a glue guy, it's like they don't show up in the box score. They do a lot of the little things. Everyone will like vouch for them, but someone that may not necessarily watch a lot of basketball won't necessarily be able to pick them up. And that's not the case with Stevie. For the last month plus, I think he's second on the team in offensive rebounding. He's shooting over 40% from 3 now. I think he's above 60% on 2s in conference play. So he has become a well-rounded player that kind of exceeds the glue label. But on defense, it's so much fun to watch. So his stats don't necessarily pop out as much as someone like Oso from an advanced analytics perspective, but his impact on the floor is immense. When I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago making a case for Defensive Player of the Year for him, he was 4th in the Big East in terms of defensive REPM. What REPM does is it takes all of your box score stats, does on-off in terms of how good a team is with or without you, and then runs a regression. Again, I'm not a math guy, even though I like numbers. They do the fancy calculations, and it gives you a number that tells you, unless you compare based off a million different factors against other players on different teams. And again, he was 4th, and he only plays 27, 28 minutes a game. He's not necessarily the focal point on any of any set, and he's always guarding the team's best players. So to me, what makes him special, and the thing that Shaka has mentioned over and over, is the amount of effort he gives. He's not just out there, like waiting for his turn or watching. He is involved in every single defensive play. If you ever watch him, even if he's on the perimeter, he's always making his way to the paint, seeing if he can get a hand on the ball, backside help. Just an excellent use of his ability and energy, and he's always giving 100%. So, it again, another story where you saw him freshman year. He was expected to come in, maybe play some point guard. He was one of the best scorers in Pennsylvania history. So you didn't necessarily expect him to come in and be this defensive pest glue guy, but he's morphed into this role about as well as anyone can. And I know that one of the mantras from Marquette's team this year is be a star in your role, and no one exemplifies that better than Stevie. He's not the first option on offense. He's probably not the fifth option either, but he knows what his role on this team, and he does it to perfection. The one other thing I think that's interesting is that the freshmen on this year's team have had a little bit of a spotty roles in the sense that you don't really need a lot from them right now. You have your starting five, you have Chase, you have Ben, but with the injuries and with the fatigue and with everything, is you've seen them kind of step up. And one of the interesting parts, and bring it back to Stevie, is Trey Norman, who has a lot of confidence from the staff, and it didn't really get a ton of minutes, but the results are not good. If you look at his metrics, nothing there is there. He's fine, but you hear the staff talk about him. You see the way he attacks the floor. It reminds me a little bit of Stevie, not in the sense that he's a defensive maestro, but in the sense that the staff trusts him for his role. And right now they're asking him to create. They're asking him to go in. So it is interesting to see how the change in the way a player comes in and the way they end up developing for Marquette and their role on any given team. That connection is definitely there.
Speaking of Jop, JD mentioned it. We were talking before the show, Andre, that, okay, he'll turn it over, not the most comfortable when he's dribbling that ball, but he's been asked to do some amazing things on defense. How valuable has he been, and what have his overall metrics been like?
No, so that was the one big thing. Going into the season, you're replacing Omax, who is an NBA-level defender, probably the best defender on the team last season, and someone that could switch 1 through 5, with Joplin, who had some of the worst individual defensive metrics, who you really couldn't play outside of the 4, who was not a great switchable, and he was not necessarily aware. And that's the big thing, is there's so much rotation and movement in Shaka's defenses that even if you're guarding a guy, that doesn't mean you're guarding for the whole possession, because as soon as the trap comes, you got to be able to rotate on the perimeter. And that was something he did not do well. Obviously, this summer, he transformed his body. The Versa Climber is an inside joke, but again, Ben Steele of the Journal Sentinel was very, very in-depth. I think he went in and did one of the trainings with him. So he became a kind of different level athlete. Now, that's not to say Jop is Omax. He's not Omax. He's definitely not a defensive first person, but he went from a liability defensively to someone who was made up part of a top 20 defense. And yes, some of the metrics do get worse with him on versus him off defensively, but he more than makes up with that with his offense. I think when I last checked on the 5-man lineups, the 5-man of TK, Cam, Stevie, Oso, and Omax, which made up over 500 possessions last year, was at a similar rate than the 5-man starting lineup this year. So you really haven't seen as big a drop-off as I feared. I thought that this team would be worse defensively, but again, that shows that stats only take you so far. There's a lot of work and individual plaudit that goes behind any of these numbers.
One comment, the schedule, people were asking me, because they'll say I'm the best Marquette apologist that there is, and I always can come up with info to back what I'm saying, but how did we lose to Wisconsin? And I thought one of the reasons why was it was very unusual to have that Maui tournament early, where we had Final Four Elite Eight competition right away coming in right in November. Mike Dean used to say, I'm easing up on these guys. I want them to peak right around January 15th and then take the next step, maybe the last, as opposed to Tom Crean, who was like, October 1st is when I want to peak and I want to stay there the whole time. And the guys lose their legs or whatever. I thought Marquette lost their legs a little bit. I want to get your thought on that. And then the other thing is the devastating injury to Sean Jones, because there were, I know that the announcers at Maui were saying, Jay Billis was saying, the energy that Marquette is expending on defense is absolutely amazing. And I don't think they can do that anymore. Shaka has had to adjust to the intensity on the perimeter without Sean Jones.
No, I think those 2 points are actually perfectly related. The defense, the style of defense that Marquette plays is very active in the sense that it's not a pack line. They're not waiting for the opposition to come. As soon as the ball goes into the post or goes into the corner, they are trapping. Not necessarily havoc in the sense that Shaka played at VCU or it's a full court press and you're just trying to create turnovers everywhere. It is very contained. They're trying to, one, slow you down and make sure you take as much of the shot clock as possible because they want you taking a bad shot late in the shot clock. But two, once they have you in that corner, then it's a scram. It's everyone's rotating, making sure you cover. And that takes a huge toll on the defense. And we've seen it even without Kolek. No one's going to say Kolek is an NBA-level defender. But the defense the last 3 games without him has been significantly worse. And why is that? Part of that is because you have no Sean, you have no Tyler. So now you have players playing an excessive amount of minutes. So there has to be this balance of when you can press on the gas pedal and when you kind of got to reserve some of that. And in this defense, if you're not constantly pressing the gas pedal, you're liable to get burnt. Also, Quincy Olivari hit some unbelievable step-back threes that you can't really do anything against. But in general, your point is 100% spot on, John, there, that you need the full gas tank. And that's why having Tyler come back at full health, if and when he comes back for the NCAA tournament, is of vital importance. Not just because he's a one-of-a-kind player that's an All-American, 2-time All-American, but also because Marquette's style of play is dependent on having the bodies and having the people that know how to play within that system.
What's your take? Man, this is just incredible from paint touches. Andre, you mentioned your writing and what have you. Can you, if people are interested in knowing more of your fabulous work, how can they secure it? How can they access it?
So painttouches.com. We've secured that domain for 11 years now. We're not stopping. So you can always go painttouches.com or search for Paint Touches on Yahoo or Google or whatever you're using nowadays. But also I'm on Twitter more often than not. I think I write about once or twice a week for the site. But all of my stray thoughts, all of the too many numbers. I'm not going to lie. My wife is like, seriously? But too many numbers. If you go to X or Twitter, however you want to label it nowadays, that's where you can find me at Paint Touches. And I love to talk shop. If you want to send a message over or whatever, I'm always looking to talk Marquette basketball with anyone and everyone.
That was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Andre. A pleasure.
Thanks for having
me. Thank you very much.
We hope you've enjoyed our latest edition of the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show, brought to you by Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of the program. Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits, and we always appreciate Craig Caston. For the great John Dodds, I'm Tom Pippins, our producer Jason Ruck, and John Pearson checking in. But JD, before we leave, you have a marvelous website.
Sure. We have MarquetteHoops.com. We'll have archives of the shows. If you want to be on our newsletter, just drop your email address in. It might take you 2 times to do it, but it'll work.
Hey, take care, everybody. God bless you, and go Golden Eagles. See you next time.